I don't understand why humans fear being forgotten, but I wonder if they know that we dogs never forget anything. Not a scent, not a touch, not a moment of kindness. My name is Murphy, and I think about things differently than humans do. While they worry about tomorrow, I live in the now. While they fear being alone, I've learned that loneliness isn't about being by yourself. It's about feeling like your heart doesn't matter to anyone. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, especially about the woman who shared my life for 7 years. Everyone thinks Mrs. Helen lived and died alone, but I know the truth. I was there. I saw everything. I felt her feelings as if they were my own. Sometimes I wonder if humans realize that we animals think about them just as much as they think about us. Maybe more. I think too much for a dog. At least that's what Helen used to tell me when she'd catch me staring at her with what she called my worried face. I've been thinking about humans since I was 8 weeks old, trying to understand why they make everything so complicated. Helen found me at the shelter on a day when her sadness smelled like rain and old flowers. I could sense her grief before I even saw her face. Dogs know these things. We feel what humans feel, sometimes before they feel it themselves. I think that's why she chose me, or maybe why I chose her. We were both carrying something heavy. I've spent 7 years studying Helen Winters, and I think I understand her better than her own children do. She's 78, with hands that shake just slightly when she's nervous, and eyes that smile even when her mouth doesn't. I think about how she always reaches for me first thing in the morning, like she needs to make sure I'm real, that she's not completely alone. Our apartment on the 3rd floor has become my entire universe, and I think about every corner of it. The way morning light hits our kitchen table where Helen writes in her journal. The spot by the window where I sit and wonder about all the people in the other buildings. Are they lonely too? Do they have dogs who think about them? I think Helen talks to me more than she talks to any human. She tells me about Robert, her husband who died before I was born. I never met him, but I think about him too, because Helen's stories make him feel real. She says I have his gentle eyes. I think that makes her both happy and sad. Every morning, I watch Helen make her coffee and toast, and I think about how precise her movements are, like a dance she's perfected over decades. But I also think about how she always makes enough for 2 people, then remembers she only needs 1 serving. Old habits, she says. But I think it's hope. Hope that someday someone might join her again. I think about the phone calls from Sarah and Michael, Helen's children. I can hear the distance in their voices, even from across the room. They ask about Helen's health, the weather, if she needs anything. But I think they never ask about her heart. They don't think to ask if she's lonely, if she misses them, if she lies awake at night wondering if she matters to anyone. Sometimes I think I'm Helen's translator to the world, the bridge between her thoughts and her isolation. When she talks to me, I think she's really talking to everyone she wishes would listen. Then one morning, I woke up thinking something was wrong before I even opened my eyes. Dogs think with our noses first, and Helen's scent was different, fading somehow, like a flower losing its color. I think Helen knew what was happening. The night before, she'd held me longer than usual, her fingers tangled in my fur. "Murphy," she whispered, "I think about what would happen to you if something happened to me. I think you'd be okay. You're stronger than you know." I think she was saying goodbye, even though I didn't understand it then. For 3 days, I stayed beside her bed, thinking thoughts I'd never had before. I think about death differently than humans do. For us, it's not something to fear. It's just another part of existence. But watching Helen slip away, I started thinking about human death, about the weight of unfinished business, unsaid words, unlived moments. I think Helen was dreaming about Robert during those final days. Sometimes she'd smile in her sleep, and I think she was dancing with him again. The way she used to tell me they danced in their kitchen on Sunday mornings. I didn't eat for 3 days. I think other dogs might not understand this, but I couldn't think about food when Helen was leaving. I think grief tastes bitter, fills up all the space where hunger should be. I just wanted to guard her, to think protective thoughts, to somehow will her back to full life with the force of my devotion. When Mrs. Patterson knocked on our door, I think she knew before she even saw Helen. Humans think they hide their worry well, but we smell fear, concern, the metallic scent of anxiety. I think she'd been thinking about Helen too, wondering why she hadn't seen her in the hallway. The paramedics came, and I think they see this too often. Elderly people found with only their pets for company. I could smell their professional sadness, their practiced sympathy. But I don't think they understood that Helen wasn't just another lonely old woman. I think she was extraordinary, and I was the only one who knew it. When they started to take Helen away, I think my behavior surprised everyone, including myself. I began barking, but not normal barking. I think I was trying to talk, to tell them something important. I ran to Helen's desk because I think, somehow, I knew her secret was there. I think dogs have intuition about important things. We think in instincts and feelings, not words and logic. Something told me the desk mattered, that Helen's real story was hidden there. That's when they discovered what I think might be the most beautiful secret anyone's ever kept. Hundreds of letters. I think Helen must have spent years writing them, thinking about each word, each person she wanted to reach. I think about all those nights when I thought she was just paying bills or writing grocery lists, but really she was pouring her heart onto paper. I think the humans in the room felt what I had been feeling for years, that Helen was full of love with nowhere to put it. Mrs. Patterson sat on Helen's bed reading, and I think her tears tasted like recognition, like suddenly understanding someone you thought you knew. Letters to Sarah and Michael that made me think about all the phone calls where Helen wanted to say, "I'm proud of you," but only managed to ask about the weather. Letters to Robert that made me think about how love doesn't end just because someone dies. Helen had been thinking about him every day for 7 years, writing him weekly letters about my silly antics, about how the roses in the courtyard bloomed each spring, about how much she missed dancing. But I think the letters that broke everyone's hearts were the ones to neighbors Helen had been thinking about, but never approached. I think Helen noticed everything. The tired mother in 2C who always looked overwhelmed, the elderly Mr. Rodriguez who tended his garden alone, the teenager in 3C whose parents' fighting made me whimper from 2 floors away. I think Helen saw loneliness everywhere and wanted to cure it, but she was too afraid her love wouldn't be welcome. So she wrote letters she never sent, thinking loving thoughts she never shared. Mrs. Patterson found a letter addressed to her, thanking her for always smiling in the hallway, for being the kind of neighbor who noticed when someone was missing. I think Mrs. Patterson had no idea Helen even knew her name, let alone that Helen thought about her kindness. The building manager, Frank, read his letter with shaking hands. Helen had written about thinking he was like a guardian angel, watching over all the residents, especially the elderly ones. I think Frank had always thought his job was just maintenance and rent collection. I don't think he knew he was someone's hero. That night, I think the apartment felt different without Helen's breathing, without her heartbeat nearby. Mrs. Patterson stayed with me, and I think we both needed the company. She kept reading Helen's letters, and I think she was starting to understand what I'd always known. Helen wasn't just lonely, she was full of love looking for a home. I think Helen would have been amazed to know that her secret thoughts, her private feelings, her careful words were finally reaching the people she'd been thinking about all along. When Dr. Sarah Chun received Helen's letter 2 weeks later, I think the universe was completing something Helen had started. Helen had read about Dr. Chen's work with isolated seniors and had been thinking about writing to her for months. I think Helen knew she had something valuable to offer. Not money or resources, but understanding, empathy, the wisdom that comes from thinking deeply about loneliness. I think about Helen every day now, living with Mrs. Patterson in an apartment that feels more connected to the world. I think Helen would love seeing how her letters sparked something beautiful. The Letters from the Heart program has grown beyond what anyone imagined. I think Helen's words gave permission for other people to share their own secret thoughts, their private kindnesses, their carefully guarded love. Over 300 seniors are now connected with companions who help them think out loud, who listen to their stories, who remind them their thoughts matter. I think about how Helen used to worry that her thoughts were too simple, too ordinary. But I think ordinary thoughts shared with love become extraordinary. Helen thought about the tired mother needing help. Now that mother has support. Helen thought about Mr. Rodriguez working alone in his garden. Now he teaches children about growing things. Helen thought about the teenager feeling unheard. Now he has mentors who think he's important. Mrs. Patterson organized monthly gatherings in our building, and I think Helen would be amazed to see neighbors actually talking to each other, sharing the thoughts they used to keep private. I think community starts when people stop thinking their feelings don't matter and start thinking they might matter very much to someone else. I think about love differently now. Helen taught me that love doesn't always need to be expressed directly. Sometimes it can live in letters never sent, in thoughts carefully tended, in wishes for other people's happiness. But I also think Helen's story proves that secret love, when finally shared, can change everything. I cannot speak human words, but I think that's why Helen and I understood each other so well. We both lived in the world of unspoken thoughts, unexpressed feelings, love that exists in the space between words. I think many humans live there too, thinking their private kindness doesn't count, thinking their quiet care goes unnoticed. I think Helen was wrong about being alone. She had me, thinking about her every day, feeling every emotion with her. And now I think she has hundreds of people who know her story, who think about her letters, who carry forward her belief that every person deserves to feel seen and valued. I think about you too, listening to Helen's story. I think you might have letters you've never sent, thoughts you've never shared, love you've been keeping private. I think the world needs your thoughts, your care, your attention to the details others might miss. I think Helen would want me to ask you, what loving thoughts have you been keeping to yourself? What letters are you writing only in your heart? I think someone somewhere needs to hear exactly what you've been thinking. Share your thoughts in the comments. I think Helen's listening, and I think she'd be proud to know her story inspired you to think about love in new ways. Subscribe here and never miss another story that inspires.